Hello there! As long-time viewers might know, we here at Curihistory love a good self-defeat. Season 1's second episode is a good example of that. But the Austrians are not the only ones capable of losing against an enemy that didn't even show up to the fight. Turns out the Russian Empire had a similarly embarrassing encounter with friendly fire. If you want to know the details, stick around and enjoy the tale of the Dogger Bank incident. Helmsman, set course for edutainment. A little historical backdrop first. In the early 20th century, both the Russian Empire and the Japanese Empire were expansionist powers, and both had grown in the same direction. Russia had made their way through Siberia, and Japan had made its ambitions in Korea and Manchuria clear. At the tail end of the previous century, the Western powers had mostly banded together to stop the Japanese expansion. But with the signing of the Anglo-Japanese alliance in 1902, the land of the rising sun grew bolder again. They offered to accept the Russian claims on Manchuria in exchange for Russia's acceptance of Korea as Japanese territory. The Russian Empire, however, rejected the proposal as it had already started expanding its rail network towards Korea. The signal was clear, as the Empire wouldn't invest so much into the infrastructure of a foreign territory. Knowing where this path would take them, the Japanese Empire decided to strike first and attack the Russian Pacific Fleet at Port Arthur in January 1904. Days later, both sides officially declared war on each other. Unlike most other nations of the time, the Japanese had heavily invested into the modernization of their country during the Meiji Restoration. And so the Russians found themselves not only matched, but even outclassed on the high seas. While the Russian Navy was not as backwards as often believed, they still had not modernized nearly as rapidly. Another problem for the Russian Empire was the spread of their fleet. Their nation being as colossal as it was, meant their ports were far from each other. Reinforcing their fleet against the Japanese surprise attack would take months. But they had no other choice, so they ordered parts of their Baltic fleet to the Pacific. En route from their home port, a group of Russian warships got an ominous intelligence report. The British, who were allied with the Japanese, supposedly had built torpedo boats for them, and these were now prowling the North Sea. The commanding admiral, Russo-Japanese, ordered his ships to be on high alert. What neither the admiral nor his officers knew was that this report was false. It's unclear where it came from, but the Russian intelligence of the time was known to be disjointed and prone to spread misinformation and false reports. Enter Arkady Harting, probably the most infamous Russian spy of his day and age. As a young man, he had joined a revolutionary faction, but was soon recruited by one of the intelligence agencies of the empire, Akhrana. His first mission was to spy on his fellow revolutionaries, which he happily did. After several arrests, the revolutionaries became suspicious of Harting, so he was extracted and moved to Western Europe, eventually joining the Paris branch of Akhrana. This office manufactured a conspiracy to assassinate a member of the Russian imperial house, only to supply the French intelligence with enough evidence to make the arrests. This act dramatically improved the Franco-Russian relations and eventually helped establish the alliance that would stick into World War I. Now, long story short, Harting was a capable man and a trusted spy at the time, so nobody doubted his reports of Japanese torpedo boats near the Norwegian coast. Much more troubling was that his report claimed that the boats were also constructed in a way that their silhouette could be mistaken for fishing trawlers. Further rumors among the sailors that the Japanese went so far as to mine the waters around Denmark certainly didn't calm the nerves either. After navigating the phantom minefields, the group got another terrifying report. The Russian supply ship Kamchatka radioed in that they were under attack by a Japanese torpedo boat. In truth, the captain of said ship had mistaken a passing Swedish ship for a Japanese, and there was no attack to speak of. Maybe lay off the vodka, dude? Nonetheless, the damage was done. Being now confirmed in their suspicion, the Russian Baltic fleet was expecting an ambush to be imminent. Then, on the night of the 22nd of October 1904, Admiral Rozhestbensky was informed that strange boats had been spotted. He ordered an inspection with searchlights. Aha! Fishing boats! You think we would fall for that? Open fire! He might have said. Moments later, the strange boats were confronted with a hail of torpedoes. Little did the Russians know that these were in fact British fishing trawlers with their nets out. One of which, the crane, was sunk on the spot, The rest of the volley, however, missed its mark, and instead came close to another Russian ship, which now assumed this was the Japanese ambush they all had been waiting for. So the ship returned fire. Eventually, a firefight between the cruisers Aurora and Dmitry Donskoy versus the rest of the fleet began. Both sides reported engaging the Japanese in battle to the admiral. The battleship Borodino even reported being boarded by the Japanese and fighting them off in melee. Y'all really need to lay off the vodka, dudes. Fortunately for the Russian fleet, their accuracy was abysmal, so most of the shots fired never even hit any target. The battleship Oral even reportedly fired over 500 shells and never hit a single target. I think I'm repeating myself at this point, but man, you dudes need to lay off the vodka. The next day, Admiral Rozhestvensky realized that last night's battle was against none other than his own fleet. Embarrassed, the Russians left the scene and did not even stay to help the fishermen they had just attacked for no reason. This obviously did not go over well with the British public and government. In a scathing review of the incident, the London-based Times wrote, "It is almost inconceivable that any men calling themselves seamen, however frightened they might be, could spend 20 minutes bombarding a fleet of fishing boats without discovering the nature of their target." Rozhestvensky stated that a torpedo boat was spotted shortly before the attack, but British investigations couldn't find any sign of the ship that reportedly attacked the Kamchatka. Public anger about this was so great that the UK considered going to war over it. Eventually, cooler heads prevailed, and the Baltic Fleet was merely shadowed by the Royal Navy, but never attacked. The Russian Empire eventually paid compensation to the fishermen and their families. A commission co-founded by the UK and Russia also eventually concluded that the admiral did everything he could to end the battle. Spymaster Harting, who was in part to blame for this incident, continued his service as the head of the Paris Ochrana until one of his officers defected to the revolutionary side and exposed him. This caused a scandal in the French government, as it became known they had allowed a foreign intelligence service to operate under their noses. Harting himself was however rewarded for his deeds and then served the intelligence openly, remaining involved in the counterintelligence work throughout World War I. His fate after the Communist Revolution is unknown, but him being an opponent of them meant his career was over the moment they took power. The Russian Empire ended up losing their war against the Japanese, as even without this incident, the Russian Navy was simply no match for the modernized Japanese Imperial Navy. The result sent waves around the globe, as it was inconceivable that a European power would lose to an Asian upstart. This concludes today's episode. We will return to maritime mishaps in the future, so subscribe if you have not done so yet, and leave a comment and a like. Once again, special thanks to my amazing artist and to you viewers. Until next time, bye! The commanding admiral, Rozhestvensky